And there we go. We have just started recording. So again, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. Let me just get back to the beginning of my presentation. Lovely. This evening, I am here to talk to you about student finance, applying for student finance this year for students to start this year into 2025. If you are the parent of a young person, or if you are a young person who is not going to university this year, so you're either taking a gap year and applying next year, or you're going to defer, just to let you know from the beginning that you apply in the year that you're going to go. So you apply for student finance now if you're starting in September or October this year. If you're not starting until next year, you don't apply until this time next year. But you are more than welcome to stay because the information doesn't really change very much year on year. So what I'm going to tell you this evening will be really good prep, even if you are deferring or you're not going this year. There is quite a lot of information, just to let you know, this evening. But as I say, the slides will be available for you to go through in your own time. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that people have about student finance or about any aspect of UCAS, pathways, university applications, anything like that. As I say, you'll find my email address at the end of the presentation. So let's go. So I'm going to start with the very, very basics. Some of you, again, will already know this. You might have had student finance yourself, or you might have supported other young people, other children or other young people who have applied for student finance before. But just in case you don't, that's why I'm going to start from the beginning. So SFE, Student Finance England, is the company that you're going to be dealing with, and they provide government-backed financial support to all students from England who are going into higher education in the UK. So even if you or your young person is applying to university in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, it's still SFE, Student Finance England, that you are dealing with because that is where you live. The two main costs that young people are going to have, they have at university, are firstly their tuition fees and secondly their living costs. And there are two loans that are connected but separate that young people can apply for, one to cover the tuition fees and one to cover those living costs. I'm going to go through both this evening. The amount that they can borrow depends on three things. It depends on the student's financial circumstances, so the household income of the parent or parents that they live with. It depends on the course, and it depends on where they are studying. And it's worth remembering from the beginning that all monies from Student Finance England are a loan and they are all repaid after graduation. None of this, unfortunately, is a student grant anymore that some of us can remember. All of this is a loan, I'm afraid to say. So starting off, who is eligible for student finance? So all British citizens doing their first degree in the UK are eligible for student finance. All EU citizens, if you have settled status, are eligible. And there are some other groups as well. So refugees, people who've been granted leave under Afghan relocations and assistance policy, and a few other circumstances in which you are entitled to student finance. There are a few ways that you can find out, that you can check. Firstly, it's worth noting that eligibility is based on the student status, not the parent status. So the best way to check is in these two places here. UK CISA, really good website which lays it out really clearly, and the Complete University Guide, which again is a great site for general information. They've got a really nice page here, which is easier than the government's page to work out if you are eligible or not. If you're not sure, again, like everything, feel free to drop me an email and I'm more than happy to help you out. There is also a link there at the bottom to the full government information that tells you who qualifies. That is a bit more lengthy than the Complete University Guide one. So the current maximum tuition fee that universities or colleges can charge new students per year is £9,250. And it's £9,250 for each year of study. Most undergraduate courses are 3 years. Some of them are 4 years, especially if you're taking an integrated foundation year. And some, such as medicine or adjacent courses, are 5 years. So do check and see the length of the course that your young person or that you are applying for. And how much of that do you have to pay up front? Zero. There is no requirement to pay anything for tuition fees until you or your young person has graduated university and is earning a minimum of £25,000 a year. You might see that. I'm just going to mention this very, very briefly, just because you may have seen it on the news. The current government is proposing a change to student finance. It's going to just change the name from student finance to lifelong learning entitlement. It's a proposal at the minute, and it's just going to restructure student finance slightly to make it easier for people who later go into university or going into further education or higher education later in their life. Really, the main impact it will have is it will change its name from student finance to LLE, but that's nothing for us to be concerned about at the minute. So, as we said, tuition fees. Tuition fees are currently fixed. It's fixed until 2025, until next year, and it's been fixed at that amount for quite a long time now, for about more than 10 years. Nearly every university charges the full fees. You get the occasional one who charges a bit less, but they nearly all charge the same amount. So assume that that's going to be the amount that your young person will pay. And all of that is covered by the tuition fee loan. The tuition fee loan is not means tested. So regardless of what your household income is, regardless of how much you earn, the student gets the same amount of loan to cover those tuition fees. And the important thing about this loan is that your young person, you will never see this money. It goes straight from the government to the university. It never goes into the student's bank account. The student never sees it. It just goes straight to the uni. These tuition fees, just to give you a sense of what they're for, they cover the teaching and obviously like maintenance of university buildings and all the different things that are involved in running a university and running university courses. They pay for admin facilities, libraries, IT, student support services, all that kind of stuff. They do not cover anything that the student has to pay for outside of that. So they don't cover living costs, textbooks, course materials, personal tech, anything like that. They have to be paid for by the student, and we'll come on to that in a little while. Sorry, if you could you just check anybody who's got their mic on, please just check and make sure that it's on mute. Thank you very much. Lovely, thank you. So, as I've said, eligible students don't pay any tuition fees up front. They also don't have to borrow the full amount. So, for example, if a family wanted to contribute part of the tuition fees, you can absolutely do that. You can choose how much of the tuition fees that you borrow. It doesn't depend on household income. It is repayable, but only when you earn 25 grand a year before tax. And I'm going to talk through the breakdown of that a little bit towards the latter end of the presentation. So the other part of the loan, the other bit that you get is the maintenance loan. And this is the more complicated one. This is what the loan that students get to help with all the other things they need to pay for while they're at university. So the main one, of course, is rent, accommodation for most students, books, clothes, travel, socializing, other bills, anything like that. All students can get some maintenance support, but it varies. The maintenance loan is means tested, and it's tested depending on where you live and study and the income of the parents or parent they live with, or the parent who has responsibility for that young person. This loan is different because it's paid directly to the student. It goes into their bank account each term, so that the full amount they get for the year, say they got £3,000 a year, they'll get more than that, but say it was £3,000 a year, they would get £1,000 each term, 3 terms sent to their bank account. Students are responsible for managing that money, including paying their own rent, sorting out their own direct debits, paying their own bills. Again, I'll talk on this a little bit more later on. But this is a very different kind of loan to the tuition fee loan. Again, like the tuition fee loan, though, it's repayable, but only when you leave and only when your income is £25,000 a year or more. So a little bit more then on how the loan is paid to students. It comes in 3 installments. They'll get it in September, January, and April. It's roughly split. The January and September ones are always the same. The April one is slightly bigger because it's meant to cover summer a little bit there. So you get it 3 times a year. Students, again, I'll talk about this later, but you have to make sure that you are able to manage that over that time. So that money has got to last you from September to January, from January to April, and then from April until September, when your second year loan will start to be paid in. So, how much loan can a young person get? It depends on, as I say, where they study and where they live. So, if the young person lives in their parental home, so they live at home with their family, the maximum loan they can get is £8,610 this year, and that's per year. If they live away from home, so in their own accommodation or uni accommodation outside of London, it's just over £10,000. And if they study in London and they live away from home, 13,348. And that is to basically to cover the fact that, as we all know, accommodation in London is so much more expensive than in lots of other places in the country. So that extra loan there is to account for that. Same, there's slightly less money available if the student lives in the parental home, because the assumption is that they will either be paying no rent or certainly less rent than if they were living by themselves. The government have a student finance calculator, which you can go to. There's the links on the bottom here. You can put in your household income and where your young person will be going to university, and it will give you a rough amount of how much maintenance loans they can expect to get. This covers it a little bit here. So here we are. So household income of £25,000 or under. If they are living at home, they will get the full amount. And you can see as it goes up here, when it gets to £60,000 here, it maxes out at 3,790. When the household income gets to £65,000, it maxes out at 4,767. And when it gets just over £70,000, it maxes out for the London one. So again, you can see it is staged depending on where that person lives. And you can see at the top there, that number is the household income amount at which the means testing stops. So if your household income is more than that and your young person is living at home, you will get the minimum. If it's more than this, they're living elsewhere, you'll get the minimum. If it's more than this in London, you'll get the minimum. Hope that makes sense. There is some other help available for young people at university. Most universities have a range of scholarships and bursaries. These are granted most often to students either who have a disability or students who have challenging financial circumstances, and some are also available for members of unrepresented groups in higher education. And these usually are this is money that doesn't have to be paid back. Now, the only tricky thing with scholarships and bursaries is there's no kind of central hub to apply for them. So you can't apply through UCAS. You need to check directly with the university that you're applying to. And there's usually some kind of application form to complete. Sometimes you need to provide evidence of things like financial circumstance. However, there is this website here, the Scholarship Hub, which is a really good place to start because there you can put in the universities that you're thinking of going to, and it will bring up all the bursaries and scholarships that are available. So that can be a nice place, an easy place to find them rather than trying to trawl through university websites. Some examples here that just show that universities all over the country have scholarships available. So Hull has some here. I'll show you this one. Let's have a little look. Mhm. So this is the University of Hull page. And you can see here that 10 students with high academic achievement and potential get a full tuition fee scholarship. That's a postgrad one. Another postgrad one. So again, you have to look carefully. There's a very specific one here, an Armed Forces Bereavement Scholarship. And you can see here, 6 pages of different scholarships that are available just for Hull University. So it is really worth looking into because it might be that you're entitled to some free money. So make sure that you have a look. If a young person, if a student, sorry. is applying for a career related to the NHS. They can apply for an NHS Learning Support Fund. This is worth up to £5 a year, and it also pays back any costs that come from placements. So again, if you're doing a degree such as like midwifery, radiology, those kind of or medicine, those kind of things, have a look at the NHS Learning Support Fund as well. Any students with a disability, there is the Disabled Students Allowance that is available. That is to cover specific things. It can cover things like specialist equipment, translation software, computers that might be needed. It can cover things like interpreters. It can cover things like travel if it's necessary because of a disability, or things like printing large copies of documents. Anything like that, any cost that having a disability might incur. And that the disability includes mental health challenges, long-term illnesses, physical disabilities. Please visit, if you think that applies to you or your young person, please have a look at the Disabled Students Allowance page to make sure that you get anything that you're entitled to. And if a student has an adult who is financially dependent on them, so if they're a carer and they're looking after someone in a way that they are that someone is dependent on them, they can also apply for an adults dependent grant as well. So if you're studying abroad, so some people will be doing a course where there is a year that is a sandwich year, as a study abroad year. During that year, you do have to pay a little bit of tuition fee, but it is reduced to 15%. So if you're normally paying 9,250, you instead pay 1,835, and you get a loan for that in the same way. You might be able to get a grant for some of that, or some of it to cover your travel expenses. And if you do get a grant, you don't have to pay them back. Again, the best people to deal with around that will be the university that you go to. Okay, so that is the basics. That's the outline of what student loans are and what they look like. I'm just going to talk to you for a little bit now about the process of applying for the loan. This is the bit where there's usually the most questions. If you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, type them in the chat while I'm talking, or save them for the end of the presentation, and then I can answer them for you. Okay, so to apply, the student needs to apply first before you do. Or before families do. So students should go to gov.uk, sorry, /student finance register. If you just put student finance into Google, it's the first thing that comes up. And the student will need to register their details first. And when they do that, they'll get this little nice little window here that says they've successfully registered. It will confirm their email address back to them, and it will give them a CRN, a customer reference number. It's really important that they keep a note of that in an important place, because they will need that all the way through their degree and when you support their student loan as well. As I said, the student has to apply before the parent can apply. When they apply, they will need to provide some ID. And the easiest way to do that, if you're a British citizen, if you've got a British passport, the easiest way for the student to prove who they are is to just enter their passport number. They can also upload a photo of their birth certificate if they don't have a passport. If the student's an EU national, they'll need their settlement share code. And elsewhere in the world, you are probably going to have to send off some information. Most commonly, passport, a residence card, something like that. Again, the best place to find out that is the student is the. Sorry, can we just pop ourselves on mute, please? Thank you. The student finance website will tell you that. So when the young person goes into the student finance website and registers themselves, when they go to the ID check bit, if they need to send off anything, it will tell them what they need to send. And the student has to have their own bank account in their own name to apply for a student loan. The student finance is not allowed to pay any monies into an account that's in any name other than the student themselves. This link here is actually from last year's student finance campaign, but it's quite handy. There's a lot of information there, and there's some little videos and other bits and bobs about that early bit of the application process. It can be quite helpful. So this again is a really handy link. This is the government guidance for people, in your case, families, providing evidence to support a student finance application. And this will have everything that you need on here. Just to let you know, you don't have to support the application. So if your household income is above the maximum that we looked at earlier, further back on the slides, it's it's probably not worth you supporting the application because your young person isn't going to get any more. The only benefit to it is if your circumstances change in the future, it can be easier to re-upload your information and give them information again. For example, if you change your job or your household income changes in the next couple of years. But you don't have to support an application. You don't have to. The young person will still get a minimum amount of loan. They'll still get about £3,700 worth of loan, even if you choose to not give any information and not support the application. So it is up to you whether you want to do that or not. The tuition fee loan is not affected by this. They get that regardless, even if you choose not to support a maintenance loan application, or if you choose to not take out a maintenance loan, because again, you don't have to. If the student wants to fund their own studies or a family wants to help them, completely fine. That doesn't affect the tuition fee loan. You can take the tuition fee loan without the maintenance loan. Once your young person has set up an account, you will get an email that will invite you to support the application. So please make sure they put your email address in correctly. You will then have to follow that link and set up an online account for yourself. If you don't, if for some reason you don't get the email, you can actually just go to this site here and put in your young person's CRN number or put in their name, and you can find them that way and connect yourself to their account. You will need to provide financial information, so your income, household and personal income for the previous tax year, and you'll need to provide information about your marital status as well. HMRC will then check that, and they just check it matches their records. It usually takes them a few weeks to do it. And most people, the vast majority of people, do not need to send any evidence through to HMRC. If they do ask you for something, you can usually upload a copy of it rather than having to put anything in the post. So if they want your P60 or something like that, you can usually upload a photo. You need to provide evidence from the previous full financial year, so last year. And once all your information has been confirmed, Student Finance will message your child and say, we've checked everything. This is how much money you are going to get. There is some useful information here that I'm not going to go through in detail now because I'll let you go through it in your own time. But there's the main Student Finance website there. These YouTube videos are all produced by Student Finance. They are from last year, but they're still very, very good. Main guidance here. Student Room has a nice sort of very straightforward page here on student loans and on understanding student loans. And there's a full FAQ here from what used to be the Student Loans Company, Student Finance England, about the ins and outs of student finance. So that's the application bit. The application, as I say, for most people is really straightforward and doesn't take very long. We don't yet know when the deadline is going to be. It's usually the end of May. So what Student Finance say is if you get your application in by the end of May, you're guaranteed to get the money in your account by the time you start university in September or October in a few cases. It's not a deadline, as in Student Finance never closes. So if, for example, your child isn't planning on going to university now, but they change their mind in August, they can actually apply for Student Finance in August. They can apply in September. They can apply while they're at university. So if they choose, for example, not to take out a maintenance loan, but change their mind once they get there, they can apply for a loan later on. Totally fine. The only thing there, of course, is there will be a delay with them getting the money. So the best practice is to apply by the end of May to make sure that they have the money in their account for the start of term. So because they will need to pay for accommodation and so on and so forth. But you don't have to, as I say, meet that deadline. We are aware that the deadline for student finance is always slightly before the application reply deadline for UCAS. So students have to confirm their offers, have to accept their offers with UCAS by the 6th of June, and the student finance deadline is the week before. If you put, if for example, you put in student finance that you're going to go to Leeds University, and student finance calculates based on that, and then you change your mind and you decide you're actually going to go to Imperial and you're going to stay and you're going to live at home, then all the student needs to do is log back into student finance, change that detail, and it will recalculate their money for them. It's better to do the application early and then change it later because that's much quicker rather than waiting and then doing the application late. Same thing in August. When they get their results in August, if they change their mind about where they want to go, and they're going, or they go into their insurance, or they go through clearing, they can just log in and change the destination. Same if they decide they don't want to go to university, they can just log in and cancel. And that's absolutely fine. There will be, the loan won't count in that case. It will just be cancelled. You can do that anytime up to the start of term. Once term started, it gets a little bit more complicated again, which I'll come on to in a few minutes. Okay, so repaying the loans, the bit that we don't want to talk about, but we will. So all the loans, so everything that's borrowed, tuition fees and maintenance loans, is brought together to make one lump sum. So you don't make a tuition loan repayment and a maintenance loan repayment. You just make one student loan repayment. It's all put together. And that repayment is based on the student's future salary. The repayment per month is based on that, not how much they borrowed in the first place. I'll explain that in a sec. So the overall amount borrowed doesn't affect the amount they pay back each month. It only affects the time they pay it back for. So the more they borrow, the longer they pay it back for, but the payment per month is the same regardless. Students only make repayments when they're working and when they're earning over the repayment threshold, and the student loan does not affect credit scores in any way. No student makes any repayments until their income is over £25,000 a year before tax. So they also don't start paying until the year after they graduate. So if you're studying a full-time course, if you graduate in July, then you don't start paying until the April the year after. So you get a little bit of reprieve from having to pay it back. And the amount you pay back is 9% of any income over 25 grand. And that comes straight out of their pay. If they have PAYE, it comes straight out of their pay packet. HMRC just deal with it. If their income falls to below £25,000 at any point, repayments automatically stop. Nothing goes out of their bank account. And any outstanding loan balance is cancelled 40 years after repayment starts. So after 40 years from graduation, if they still have outstanding bits of loan, it is wiped off at that point. So this shows you how much you pay per month, roughly. I think it's about 50p more on the higher ones. How much you pay per month once you are earning certain amounts. So if you're earning is at 24,999, it should be before tax. 9% is deducted from nothing, so you don't pay anything because you're not earning anything over 25 grand a year. If you earn 30 grand a year, you come out of uni, you start earning £30,000, you're paying back 9% of £5,000, which is about £37 a month. By the time you get up to 35 grand, it's 9% of 10 grand, 75. And by the time you're earning you're really well, 50 grand, then you're paying back 9% of £25,000 and your payments go up. So you can see here, if you are on a lower wage, then you pay back very little per month. This is why young people shouldn't be afraid of borrowing as much as they need, because the amount they pay back per month doesn't change. So, if you borrow £20,000 and you earn 35 grand, you're going to be paying back £900 a year. If you borrow 50 grand, and you're earning £35,000, you're still only paying back the same percentage from your salary. So you still only pay back £900 a year. To be absolutely ridiculous, if you borrowed £1 billion, you're still going to be paying the same annual repayment. It's just that it will obviously take you a lot longer to pay off £1 billion than it will to pay off £20,000. But the thing that people I think are really worried about is coming out of uni and just having this like really awful debt like immediately, and when they start earning they're going to be paying loads and loads of money back. They're not. The amount that they pay back is pretty small. Certainly when you're earning 30, 35. If you're earning an average wage, then you're paying back a fairly small amount of money per month. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about interest, which until recently I barely spoke about in these sessions, but I will talk about it a little bit today. The loan does accrue interest even while the student is studying, so it begins to accrue interest from the time that the student begins. So from the first day of term of the first year, the loan starts to accrue interest. So the amount charged historically has been RPI plus 3. However, as we all know, I think, the interest has been so incredibly high recently that the government has stepped in and they have capped interest. So interest is currently capped at 7.7%. It cannot go any higher than that. If you want to look in more detail at how interest is calculated, there is a link there for you to do so. People starting university in 2024 are on what's called Plan 5. That's just because there are other historical versions of student finance from people who took their loans out many years ago. I think there's been quite a few different versions of student loans. And again, a full breakdown of what I've just talked about in terms of what you pay per month can be found here on the government website as well. And again, you're looking at a Plan 5 loan. Managing money. So the fun bit, I guess, is how you're going to spend it. So we know what the tuition fee loans for. Students don't see it. You have nothing to do with it. It just gets paid to the university, and then you essentially get a bill every month once you graduate. But the maintenance loan, the young person does get, they have to manage that. So the maintenance loan is designed to pay for things like, first and foremost, accommodation. That's the biggest expense that a student will have. They also have to pay for their own study materials, such as books, photocopying, things like that. If you're doing a STEM subject, things like lab equipment's usually paid for, but lots of other things won't be. Travel, obviously things like food and drink. They will have to pay for their own phone contracts. If they live in university accommodation, Wi-Fi is usually included, but do check. And obviously any social activities they want to do. I would always recommend that they get contents insurance, including cover for phones, laptops, tablets, any electronics that they take out of their accommodation, because they can be very expensive if they're damaged. And it is, and the student accommodation halls will not cover that if a young person suffers damage to their belongings in their hall. The university won't cover it. They will obviously have to pay for any media, entertainment, and subscriptions, and any other costs as well that they accrue whilst whilst at university. Um, as I've said, and I just keep reiterating this just to make sure that because the maintenance loan is paid directly to the student, and they have to manage that. So they've got to set up their own direct debits. They've got to handle, if the phone bill is if unless you're paying their phone bill, if the phone bill's in their name, they have got to handle it and pay for that. They have got to make sure that their rent is paid. They will need to manage their own money. They cannot get an advance on their loan. So if they run out of money, in November, if they've spent all of their term one loan, it's gone. They can't get any. They can't get any more, unfortunately. Um, if that happens, universities do always have hardship funds. However, they are also loans. So that is, again, money that has to be paid back. They will have conditions around them, but please, students and parents, if you find that you have run out of cash, please do go and talk to student support services, because they will help you. And student bank accounts it's always worth getting a student bank account because they usually have a big interest-free overdraft facility. They are usually interest-free for the duration of the degree, sometimes for a couple of years afterwards. So check that. And for the first year or the first term, they're often restricted. So what you see a lot is a student bank account. A student bank account will have a £1,500 interest-free overdraft, but you can only have £500 in your first term, which is generally to stop people, moving away from home, going mad, spending all their loan, spending all their overdraft, and then finding themselves in trouble. But it is absolutely recommended to get a student bank account. They usually have like perks with them as well. So things like a rail card, like a free or a cheap young person's rail card. Sometimes you get a bit of cash back. Have a look, shop around because there are some good ones. Just a brief note then on rent costs, because accommodation is one of the things that people again are really concerned about. In 2022, which is the last year that I could find figures for, the average rent for halls or university-owned accommodation outside of London was about £166 a week, bumped up to £212 a week in London. Private sector accommodation, obviously hugely varied, but you're looking about £100 more in London than anywhere else, as again, I think we all know. Um, I would always recommend that young people go into university owned halls, student accommodation, wherever they can in their first year. It's lots easier. You don't have to deal with things like deposits for private accommodation. You don't have to deal with landlords or letting agencies. Your landlord is the university, and bills are generally included in university halls as well. So your uni accommodation will include your gas, your electric, your water, as I say, your Wi-Fi, um, things like that. Students don't pay council tax as long as everybody in your house is a student. So this usually applies to second year students more than first year, but be careful about moving in with people who are not students because you'll find yourself liable for council tax. You can get an exemption certificate from the university if you are all students. That's obviously not a concern if you are living in university halls. But yeah, that would really be my recommendation to look at university accommodation. It's also generally easier to sort of get to know people, to make friends, because everybody's a similar age, living together. University accommodation varies. Although there's averages there, it does vary a lot in terms of cost. So again, do shop around, have a look. Please don't be bullied by universities sending you frantic emails saying, you must book your accommodation, time is running out. They're awful for this. Um, and UCAS are actually trying to stop them doing it, trying to stop them putting pressure on people to do it. Um, Usually they won't be allocated accommodation until after people have accepted their offers in June. So please try not to be bullied about it now, if you can. I know it can feel quite pressured when they're sending you emails all the time, though. Oh, one thing to bear in mind, sorry, is that uni accommodation is often on term time only. Again, check this. Some of it is, some of it isn't. Um, if it is term time only, you've got to go somewhere else during the holidays. Usually that means obviously going home. So that can mean taking all your stuff home. So if you're going to university far away from home, it may be worth looking for university accommodation that has holidays included, to make sure that you don't have that inconvenience. Do check on that. Um, just a few other costs to think about. Travel is often one of the next biggest costs that young people have. I've already mentioned young person's rail cards. They're really worth getting. You can save quite a lot of money on train fares. Obviously, expenses vary a lot depending on where you are. If you live on campus, your travel expenses probably won't be very high because you're studying where you live. But if you live in town or you're not at a campus university, you might have to travel to lectures and seminars and so on. Uh, I know most people who live in London, or certainly most young people who live in London, don't have a car. But if you or your young person has one, it's not worth taking it. There's not going to be any parking. um, a note on textbooks. Again, you'll be told this at things like Freshers Week, but you can usually get second-hand ones. It's worth buying a slightly older edition. You generally don't have to have the most up-to-date edition of a textbook. Usually a slightly older one is fine. Uh, Photocopying in the library. I'm just thinking about back when I was a student. Photocopying was a surprising expense that I wasn't expecting. That cost me like a few pounds a week. Um, when you're moving away, remember that services like Netflix now have account sharing restrictions, so do look into that. There are things that can save you money, things like Spotify Family, things like adding an extra account to Netflix. But please, please have a conversation about this before you go. Please speak to your family about budgeting, about expenses, about costs. Please don't find yourself running out of money. So, a something we don't want to happen, but does happen occasionally. Just a very, very quick bit about what would happen in the case of a student dropping out of university before they finish their degree. So, firstly, you have to pay back everything you borrowed, even if you don't finish your course, you still owe the money. Um, the way that the way the fees loan works is you pay 25% for term one, or you owe 25% for term one, you owe 25% for term two, and then you owe the rest of it for term three. So, for example, if you start university in September, if you drop out in November, you will owe one term's worth of fees, £2,312, plus whatever your first term of maintenance loan was. If you drop out in February, you'll owe term one and term two. If you drop out in June, you'll owe the whole year. And that accrues year by year. So if you drop out in term one of year two, you'll owe the whole of the first year plus term one of the second year, and so on and so forth. The maintenance loan, as I say, you pay back as much as you've borrowed. You also pay interest on it. Um, and another thing to check out as well, if you are going to leave university, is your accommodation contract, because you might have to pay up the full year, even if you leave midway through. That's another reason why uni accommodation can be a bit better, because it tends to be a bit more forgiving if you do have to leave university for some reason, whereas private rentals, landlords tend to want the full contract for the full year. Um, what happens then if you want to, again, this is thinking about the future, but just so you know, what about another degree? So if you drop out of your degree, you may not be able to get funding for another one. You're usually only entitled to full funding for your first degree. So if you do drop out and you go back a few years down the line and start again, you might find that you don't get as much loan when you go back again. Unless if you have a reason, a compelling personal circumstance for dropping out of your course, then you can often still get full funding for your new degree. You are also entitled to, everyone's entitled to like a year of bonus funding. So, for example, if you start a course and you decide you don't like it, and then you want to start a different course or start a different university, then you're always entitled to like an extra year. Or if you're ill partway through the year and you have to take a year out and then do that year again, then you're entitled to funding for that year. So you get like a kind of buffer year. As I say that, I had that as well. I had to retake my third year due to illness. So, it's not uncommon for that to happen. So to sum up then, just at the end before we answer some questions, please don't panic. There's a lot of rubbish about student loans. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of fear. Please don't panic about it. Look for expert advice, impartial advice. Martin Lewis, money saving expert. He's like, his website's quite dense. It's not the most user friendly thing in the world, but there's lots of good stuff on there. Check what you're eligible for or what your child is eligible for, because you could be eligible for extra stuff. As I say, bursaries, scholarships, DSA. Please ask your child to share all of their information with universities, especially if they have something like a disability or a mental health challenge or some kind of diagnosis, because it can mean that they get extra support, extra money. They can get, as I say, hardware, software, stuff to help them. My recommendation, and this is obviously completely up to you, family by family, is that you should apply and accept as much as you can in the first place. So apply for the full fees loan, the full tuition fees loan, the full maintenance loan, and then deal with it. If you want to pay it back early, you can. If you want to, if you get to August and you decide that actually you want to borrow slightly a little bit less, you can change it. But for the sake of ease and for your peace of mind, I would just recommend that you apply for and accept the whole lot to start with. Um, Nothing accrues interest until your child starts university. So applying for your loan early, applying for it today, for example, next week, for example, they're not being charged interest between now and September when they start. It only starts in September. And as I said at the beginning, you apply for finance in the year that you're going. So if you're deferring or taking a gap year, you apply next year. Finally, then, this is my email address, lpearcey@acklandburley.camden.sch.uk. Please do feel free to email me with any questions, um, obviously about student finance, but as I've said, about any other aspect of UCAS as well, about accepting offers, about the about other things to do with accepting offers, about clearing, about results, or if your child is wavering and they're not sure whether they actually want to go to university, if you want to talk about alternatives, then that's something else that I can help with. And finally, at the end of here, there's a whole load of lovely links, helpful websites that you can use to find out some more information. Right, I'll just keep my email address up and I'll have a look. I'm going to answer the questions in the chat. So if you've got any more questions, I can see there are a few there and you want to put them in, please do. Otherwise, I've taken up quite a bit of your evening, so I'm more than happy for you to obviously to leave if you're done. And as I say, please do email me for slides, or they will be on the website they'll be under Careers and Higher Education, Student Finance on the LaSWAP website. Right, let me just answer a few questions. So first question is if there is a late diagnosis of SEN, then does that change what happens in terms of the applications? So if that late diagnosis has come in after the UCAS application's been sent off, the best thing to do is to contact the university directly that your young person is intending to accept. So as you know, they accept a firm and an insurance offer. So they accept 2 out of their possible 5. The best thing to do is to message student support or admissions at those universities to say that you've had a diagnosis that's come in after UCAS has been sent off, because you won't be able to go back into UCAS and make those changes there. But it is really important that the university know. As I say, it can be really, really helpful for young people to get that support. Second question, if Labour gets into government, what does that mean for student loans? Nothing. To be quite frank, Labour, from what we've seen, have no intention to get rid of student loans. They've got no intention of going back to a grant system or making any major adjustments to student loans. So I think we can assume that things will continue as they are. The interest is the interest rate the same for for the finance loan? Sorry, for the fees loan and the maintenance loan? Yes, it is. When do we need to apply is the next question. So the application should be open about now. They should have opened at the beginning of March. They've been a little bit slow. Keep checking. Just student finance into Google and keep checking, and hopefully they will be open very soon. And the deadline, as I say, will very likely be the end of May. Are there any loans for Art Foundation courses? Yes, there are, but it is not a student loan. So Art Foundation, standalone Art Foundation courses that are 1 year are further education, not higher education. You can, if your child or if you are 19 or under 19 when you start that course, there's no fees. If you are over 19, there are fees, and you can get a loan to cover those fees. You cannot get a loan to cover any maintenance costs, I'm afraid, because it is further education, not higher education. Um, One thing I didn't talk about actually, and it's just made me think there is part-time jobs. Just it is super common for young people to have part-time jobs at university or while doing art foundation courses, because things are really expensive, and that is quite expected, really. But I do understand that that varies course by course. If you're studying medicine, for example, you probably haven't got an awful lot of time to be doing a part-time job. If you do want to ask more about art foundation courses and about finance for art foundation courses, do email me. I can go through that in detail. Um, Average annual rent for university accommodation is, I'm just trying to think off the top of it. So between, I think it would work out between £6,000 and £8,000 a year. Um, the just thinking about the weekly costs, but it does vary slightly for university owned accommodation because it depends if you are going for the whole 52 weeks or if you're going for term time only. That can make quite a big difference. Uh, just a question about the rail card or travel slide. Let me see if I can find the one you mean. Someone just wanted me to go back. Mhm. Might have been this one, or I'm not quite sure. If you want to email me, I'll answer that question. I'll send that over because I'm not quite sure which one you're after. Right. A few more questions. What type of evidence do you need? They will often ask for your P60. That's the most common thing that they'll ask for. Or sometimes they don't ask you for any they don't ask you to upload any information. They will ask you for your national insurance number, and they'll ask you for your household and personal income. And sometimes HMRC can just go off that, but it does depend slightly. Sometimes they ask for uploaded evidence, sometimes they don't. Sorry, I'm just flicking through the questions. Oh, that's a really good question. I actually don't know the answer. If you already have a student finance account for another child, can you link your second child to this account? I don't think so, because it's the student's account and you support it. But I'm honestly not sure. I'm really sorry. I don't know. I can find out for you. If you want to drop me an email, then I will have a look into it for you. But that is a really excellent question, and I'm really sorry. I don't know the answer. Uh, okay. If I apply for a student rail card for travel for students, is it the same as an Oyster? No, a student rail card is a national rail card, and it's for travel on trains all over the country, not just in London. So it's a national rail card. Obviously, much more useful for people who are planning to study outside of London. Uh, not finance related, but how do you go about deferring entry? Um, So very quickly, to summarize very quickly, if your child has applied for 2024 entry, so for this year's entry, they can uh, they can call the uni and ask if they will defer it, but they don't have to say yes. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It generally depends on what the course is and how oversubscribed they are and how many applicants they've got. Um, Generally, courses such as medicine, computer science, maths, law don't do deferred entries. Lots of other courses do, but you would need to call the uni and ask them directly. Um, as I say, they don't have to say yes. Your choice is to then either go in September as applied for or to withdraw the application and reapply next year. Please don't withdraw an application without speaking to your head of year or to me about that. And if you do want more detailed information about deferred entry, please do drop me an email and I can talk you through it or arrange a meeting with you. Uh, what if your circumstances have changed for change in finances for this financial year? So you need to upload, as I say, the last financial year for which you have full information for. But if there has been a drastic change between last financial year and this financial year, there is the ability on student finance to tell them that. They do ask you that question, have your finances changed? So you do have the ability to do that, but they can only, but they're wanting initially the last full financial year of information. Lovely. Thank you very much. That is the end of the questions, I think. Thanks so much to everybody for coming this evening. I know it's a lot of information. Thanks for listening for so long. Just to reiterate again, please do feel free to drop me an email. I'm more than happy to help. And I wish you all the best in applying, and your young people all the best in accepting their offers in the next couple of months. Thanks again, everybody. See you all soon. Goodbye.